I wanted to thank everybody so much for being here with us today. My name is Vicki Lehman, and I am the Community Engagement Specialist at Child Care Answers. I am really excited to be able to bring this special needs panel event to you. We are so excited about this opportunity and all of the panelists that we have with us today. I did want to take a minute to just tell you a little bit more about us and who we are and the work that we do at Child Care Answers. So Child Care Answers is the local child care resource and referral agency, and we are serving Hamilton, Hendricks, and Marion counties. And so what that means is we do a lot of work with families who are looking for childcare or individualized one-on-one support. We do work with businesses and community members and agencies to help connect different agencies and different resources, as well as connecting businesses to understanding more about childcare and early childhood and maybe their employees' childcare needs. And then we also do work with childcare providers, so connecting them to orientation classes, helping them go through the licensing process, connecting them to additional resources. We do tons more besides that. I just wanted to be respectful of time and take just a tiny minute to go over who we are and what we do. You can learn a lot more about us and what we do at childcareanswers.com. At the end of this PowerPoint, when you will see that I will pop up a slide that has my info on it, you can always reach out to me via email if you have any questions or you need anything from me. We are here to help. And then one other huge thank you to our partner at WFYI. We are doing this in partnership with WFYI, and it has been fantastic to be able to plan with WFYI and talk more about the move to include and the different movements that they're doing when it comes to learning about all of the things that we have in the state and resources that we have when it comes to special needs. So these are our panel members for today. So we have Lisa Paddock of InSource. We have Stephanie Garner with Down Syndrome Indiana. We have Christine Hennessey of Family Voices Indiana. We have Bonnie Fisher from Easterseals Crossroads, Emily Badeau of Easterseals Crossroads, Dr. Tracy Gale of Easterseals Crossroads, and Blake Markley from Autism Learning Partners. So the first question that we have, and actually this is for all of our panel members, and so I guess we will start with Lisa. Lisa is from InSource, and Lisa, we would love for you to introduce yourself and give us a 1-minute, I'm going to call it an elevator speech about your agency and the work that you do at InSource.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you for having InSource here today on this panel. We're really excited to be able to take part. So my name is Lisa Paddock, and I have been with InSource for 15 years, and 10 of those years I have been the InSource Parent Liaison to the Department of Education, and InSource is the Parent Training and Information Center for Indiana. So we help families understand the educational process. We help them understand about advocacy and their special education rights and responsibilities. And our organization covers the state and offers a variety of different services, including trainings and online presence, and then individual assistance all throughout the state.
Awesome, thank you so much, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. All right, let's move on to Stephanie Garner of Down Syndrome Indiana.
Hello, so my name is Stephanie Garner and I'm the program coordinator at Down Syndrome Indiana. And Down Syndrome Indiana is a local nonprofit. We cover 44 counties throughout central Indiana, and our mission is to enhance the lives of individuals with Down syndrome. And so we like to consider ourselves a one-stop shop for information and resources so families can reach out to us. We have a lot of things that we can do to connect them. We have a lot of educational programs. We do a one-day training, a conference, we have webinars, we do community outreach, school presentations on inclusion and acceptance, as well as community presentations about Down syndrome and medical outreach presentations to providers. And we have a lot of new parent resources as well. And we do really fun, wonderful family events so that our families can network and connect.
Amazing. Thank you for being here, Stephanie. We really appreciate you. Okay, we'll move on to Christine Hennessey of Family Voices Indiana.
Thank you. I am Christine Hennessey. We are a nonprofit organization that works to provide information and training for families of children and youth with special health care needs. We also provide support to professionals who are supporting these same families. We work several projects within advocacy efforts to help engage and provide the family feel for some of the perspectives that are on different work groups throughout the state. And as the other two have said so far, we provide training and additional support with families from everything from basic insurance needs all the way to rare genetic disorders and additional information resources and testing. So we're happy to be here today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. We're happy to have you. All right, so we have 3 panel members from Easterseals Crossroads. So we have Bonnie Fisher, Dr. Tracy Gale, and Emily Badeau. And I don't know how you guys want to do it, who wants to answer the question, but just let us know, introduce yourself, and give us your 1-minute elevator speech.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak on behalf of Easterseals Crossroads. So my name is Tracy Gale. I'm a psychologist at Easterseals, and I'm also the Director of Autism and Behavior Services here. And Easterseals Crossroads is really a disability service provider in central Indiana that provides services really across the lifespan. So we provide everything from early intervention services through first steps to outpatient occupational, physical, and speech language therapies for children and adolescents. We also provide autism services, everything from a diagnostic evaluation to therapy to advocacy and support through our Family Resource Center and our support groups. We also provide services for adults with special needs through our employment program, through veteran services, assistive technology, and our adult day program. So we really try to cover everybody with special needs along the lifespan and across the lifespan, doing lots and lots of education, support, direct service, advocacy, and all of that. And are very, very happy to be part of your panel today.
Thank you for being here. And then last but certainly not least, we have Blake Markley with Autism Learning Partners.
Hi, my name is Blake Markley. I am the Associate Clinical Director at Autism Learning Partners. We are an ABA provider located on the north side of Indianapolis. We do in-center ABA therapy as well as in-home ABA in the Indianapolis area and the surrounding cities. We also provide social skills groups and parent consultation programs as well. We provide full-time ABA, so like the 30 to 40 hours a week that a lot of people typically think of, but we also provide very part-time programs for kids who are in school and just need a little bit of extra support. So we provide those services into the evening as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Blake. We really appreciate that all of you are here. And then we'll move right on to our next question that is going to be for all of our panel members before we get into really specific questions. And so the next question, and I'll go in order again, but just to say it out loud so everybody knows, the question is, how has COVID changed the way you are doing your work and what it looks like? So why don't we start with Lisa again? I'm just kind of going in order so that we give Blake some time to recover, or I would go in reverse. So Lisa, what is your answer to that question?
Well, it has and has not both. So in general, of course, everything has changed and been turned upside down. But on the flip side, it hasn't changed in that we are still giving support to families. We are attending meetings virtually at this point. By Zoom meetings or a variety of other platforms. And we are even now doing online trainings. We have just worked to adapt because basically families still need assistance during this time, and services should continue to still be given. So we are there, we are attending case conferences, we will be doing trainings, and we are still here throughout the state for families to reach out to us. But we also have been learning some more about virtual education and the way that special education services are provided during this time. But we are here for families and community partners and building that relationship with families and schools for successful outcomes.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Stephanie, we will move on to you next.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. We used to have a lot of in-person events every single month, and so we have had to completely shift and try and do a lot of virtual support for our families. But like Lisa said, we are still, like, it's business as usual. We're still getting information out there, providing the trainings. It looks a little different. In our community groups, families that come together, they're just doing that virtually now rather than in person. We're still getting information to hospitals and providers. We're still presenting to school-aged children, just over Zoom now. So
Awesome, thank you. All right, Christine, what about Family Voices Indiana?
We've actually been fortunate that we have been a fairly virtual organization for quite a while. So in that regard, for us, things have stayed the same. That said, a lot of the information that families are seeking from us has shifted to a more COVID focus in terms of advocacy. One of our big shifts has been towards the telehealth. We actually just recently were approved for a grant specific to telehealth and accessing internet services and the technical support that's needed for families, especially in rural communities who would not otherwise have access. So I would say that's probably been the number one shift of focus. Fortunately, all of our team, we're small but mighty. We serve the whole state, and we've been able to continue to do that despite, some of the changes we've had in our own lives, as well as, trying to serve these families. So it's kind of like Lisa said, everything has changed and everything has stayed the same.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Tracy, what about Easterseals Crossroads?
Yeah, so I'm going to echo what everybody else has already said, that, a lot of things have moved virtual, or at least moved virtually very early on during the pandemic. As a direct service provider, we had to do a lot of on our feet thinking about what that looks like and what could be done virtually, what couldn't be done virtually, and what needed to be done either in person. We made some hard decisions about what we could do and what needed to kind of be put on hold. We didn't want to do that for the majority of our families, but like I said, especially early in the days of not understanding even as much as we understand about COVID right now, we really worked to try to balance all of that. We have moved back because as a direct service provider, we have moved back to a lot of in-person services, though the services that we can still provide through telehealth options, we are continuing to do that. And our eyes have been open to the value in that and the benefit of doing that, especially for families that, like Christine said, who might be in communities that are a little further out from us being here in Indianapolis. And so are really excited to kind of see what continues to happen over the next few weeks and months and years as we continue to provide a hybrid of services. When we haven't been able to provide virtual services, we've just used as much social distancing and PPE as we can.
Awesome. And what about you, Blake?
Yeah, at the beginning of kind of all of this with the pandemic in March, we did transition all of our clients to in-home services only to try to maintain that social distancing, keep as much limited contact as possible. So we have reopened our clinic starting at the end of June. So we now have a limited number of clients who receive services in our clinic. They do all have their own therapy rooms with a door that can close to try to minimize additional exposure to anyone else. We do have a good majority of our clients are still opting to receive services in home. And in that case, we are limiting in terms of our staff and who is seeing who in terms of the homes that they're going into. So our behavior technicians see no more than 3 clients to make sure that they aren't going into a bunch of different homes. We require masks in our clinic. Our staff also wear them in the home. And then we also do a health screening every day for our staff and our families. Just a quick temperature check, asking all of those questions that you get at the doctor's office and everything before we actually go in and start the session to make sure that we're as safe as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Blake. All right, so now we're going to get into some specific questions. So my first question is going to be for Lisa with InSource. And the question is, what are families' rights around when it comes to IEPs and e-learning? I know that a lot of families are navigating what the world looks like now with e-learning or hybrid models and the different things that are going on. And so really addressing what a family's rights are when it comes to a child who has an IEP and they are at home e-learning or doing a hybrid model.
Well, that is probably the million-dollar question at this moment. And first, just speaking to everyone, one of the first things to keep in mind is the mental health of families. And of course, mental health of teachers too, and providers, because this has been a very, very stressful time for everyone. But to the point of your question, families' rights have not gone away. IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and Article 7, Indiana State Special Education Law is still in place. Having said that, we know that sometimes things are going to change during the time a child is learning virtually. But there are some very important components that should be considered, such as before a child's services are changed, there needs to be a case conference to do that. And parents have the ability to agree or disagree to the change in those services. In general, the case conference committee wants to have a discussion, and there should be a significant reason separate from virtual learning if a child's services are being reduced. Typically, if a child needed a service in the brick and mortar school, they still need it virtually. Now, we do know that some things are going to change because that child is not walking in to the brick and mortar. So you will want to have a conference. You will want to look at the goals. Are there some goals that perhaps can't be measured in a virtual setting? And those would be some of the ones you would want to look at. But many goals, if they are written in a measurable way, as they should be, looking at the needs of the child, most can be monitored virtually by that teacher of record. So one of the things to keep in mind is that parents' rights did not go away. There was not any kind of a waiver from IDEA or Article 7, but there are some changes in methodology and how services will be given. So families still have a right to disagree with a proposal. Families really should not be seeing just uniform letters coming out saying we are changing all kids to consult. This is an individual education plan, and those decisions would be made individually, and parent would have the right to disagree with those services. Additionally, keeping in mind some of the information that has come out from March to May about possibility of compensatory services if services were not given. That's another discussion. And then recovery services for many children who have really struggled during this time. We know that probably all kids are, but in particular, our kids with special needs are going to be at some of the highest risks. So that's another discussion, compensatory services and recovery services. So, you know, we want families to be educated. We have trainings on our website, and we are here to help, but those are some of the highlights to understand that just because COVID has disrupted all of our lives, including the way our kids go to school, it does not mean that that IEP process is put on the shelf. It doesn't mean that your child cannot get some direct services, related services, general education or special education services. But there are conversations that need to be occurring, and Article 7 and IDEA are still in place.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I know that that's super helpful to clarify for families because it can feel really confusing with all of the things that are going on right now. All right, so our next question is going to be for Stephanie at Down Syndrome Indiana. And so Stephanie, I just was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the journey that a parent might go through when their baby is diagnosed with Down syndrome, and then the resources that Down Syndrome Indiana has for families with newly diagnosed little ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So parents typically find out their baby has Down syndrome either prenatally because they choose to undergo prenatal testing or screening, or because maybe they find something on that prenatal ultrasound that indicates to that physician that that baby's going to have Down syndrome. Postnatally, so after the baby's born, parents typically find out because the physician recognizes characteristics that are consistent with a Down syndrome diagnosis. So when families get that diagnosis, it typically is really overwhelming. Parents are usually they're sad. There's a grieving process that goes on for those families. And we had a physician, a pediatrician, who is also the parent of a child with Down syndrome, a young adult now with Down syndrome, Dr. Randall Stays. And he spoke to one of our parent groups once, and he said that, and it was, what he said was really poignant. He said that a typically developing baby is born, those parents have so many hopes and dreams for that baby. They might hope that they're the varsity basketball star, that they're valedictorian of the class, that they, become a surgeon. They have all of these hopes and dreams. And throughout that child's life, those hopes and dreams get crushed, right? Like, you discover that your child's not so athletic. Maybe they lean more towards theater or band. Or maybe that, they're smart, but school's just not their thing. Probably not going to go on to med school, or they faint at the sight of blood, right? Like, our kids, typically developing kids, tend to crush our dreams, but they do so little by little throughout their lives so that we as parents don't necessarily even recognize that. But when we have a baby with Down syndrome or other disability, it can sometimes seem like those hopes and dreams are crushed kind of in one fell swoop. And so it's very overwhelming for parents. And they kind of go through this grieving process while they accept that diagnosis and replace all of those hopes and dreams. I'm a parent of a child with Down syndrome, and I very much felt that way when we got my daughter's diagnosis. I was incredibly sad. But as I connected with Down Syndrome Indiana and with other parents, I learned that, life does go on. And so it was really empowering for me to be able to connect with other families. And then those hopes and dreams that I had originally had for my daughter, I replaced with other hopes and dreams, not less than, just different. And so I think that's one of the things that's so great about Down Syndrome Indiana is we provide families with a lot of resources so that they can connect with other families and see what life is going to be like down the road, so that they can start that process of creating some of those new hopes and dreams. We have new parent packets that we pass out for free to families or providers, and they have tons of resources in there about lots of stuff that parent might need to know about related to Down syndrome. We also started a new program about a year ago called the Lucky Mama Project, and we give out these really cool welcome bags with gifts for mom and gifts for baby. Just very empowering, because so many of our families, the first thing they hear from their medical provider, from their other family members, from their community is, "I'm so sorry that your baby has Down syndrome." And that can be really overwhelming to a family who's, yes, sad, but they still want to celebrate that baby. So we pass out these gifts and we say, "Congratulations on your new baby." And we really welcome them to the community so that we can kind of change that narrative.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing, Stephanie. And I love hearing about all of those amazing resources. That is so, so great. And I'm sure that families really appreciate feeling connected and understood and embraced. So thank you so much. All right, Christine with Family Voices Indiana. Can you tell us more about the work you are doing when it comes to advocacy and connecting families to support?
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the main services that we provide is training. And our goal is to empower families to become family leaders and kind of share their experiences and continue to help as new issues arise. So we provide a variety of services, both in English and Spanish, and free to families and professionals, including training, both virtually and on demand. So they don't have to wait for a specific session. We can provide immediate services, if mom is looking in the middle of the night and needs to know how to navigate the different funding avenues to figure out what's going to work or what they're eligible for. they could access that on their time. So we have a lot of those types of resources available. We also have a wide variety of fact sheets that are updated at least annually and include information about the public services through the Department of Health, through Medicaid, through the waiver, resources to housing, if they need assistance to secure food for the family, transportation, adaptive transportation, those kinds of things are all included on our fact sheets on our website. Additional to that, we are on several both state and national work groups and projects where we're looking at services such as care coordination and bringing the medical perspective full circle with a family focus in mind. Often when people go to the doctor, they share that they feel like maybe the doctors aren't communicating, or the one physician doesn't know what the other is doing, and is my child really getting the most therapeutic treatment, and is the medication working, or is it conflicting with the other medications I'm taking, and how do I advocate for my child in that situation? How do I know which doctor is right, or when I need to be more assertive, or when I need to let the doctors make the decision? So really, we help train the families to be their own voice in those appointments and to really feel comfortable and confident that they know their information and that they're empowered to speak up on behalf of their child. We encourage, that no one is ever going to know your child the way you know your child. And so it's really important that, as parents, our role is advocacy, and we teach that especially in very new territories for families. We're working with health organizations to develop programs that are more family inclusive and more family focused, and less, we're not trying to remove the scientific aspect, obviously, but we are trying to make sure that language is communicated in a way that families understand and that they can share and get support from additional caregivers. So we're really working to bring those things full circle and ultimately just increase access and increase advocacy, and really just the confidence of families.
I love that you guys are working to really empower families and help them understand and know that they are the advocate for their child, right, and for their family, and how important it is to speak up and know what is right and what's wrong and what doesn't feel right for your family, and that it's okay. So empowering those families, that is amazing work. Thank you guys so much for doing that. All right, so Dr. Tracy Gale at Easterseals Crossroads. What steps should a parent take if they suspect their child is not typically developing and they would like to start the evaluation process?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think a really important question, because often families are the first ones to become concerned about their child's development. And so what I would say is, for families who are concerned, the first thing to do is to make an appointment with your child's pediatrician and talk to your child's physician about your concerns. Physicians' offices can do developmental screeners, they can do some questionnaires, they can explore more in depth. But what we have found often with families is it's really hard to fit all of that into a well child visit when you're also trying to take weight and height and talk about all of those, or a sick visit, and you're trying to examine ears and nose and throat and all those sorts of things. So if you have concerns, first and foremost, schedule an appointment and talk with your doctor about that. Talk with your child's doctor about that. Because it can be really easily overlooked, especially if we're talking about young children who may or may not act in their typical way when they're in the doctor's office, and they might already be a little bit nervous and they might be a little bit anxious about what's going on. And so it can be really, really difficult to get a good picture of a child's development in that situation. If your child is below the age of 3, the other thing that I would encourage families to do if they're concerned about development is to call First Steps. And your doctor can refer you to First Steps, but you can also self-refer to First Steps, and you can contact them and they'll do, again, a developmental assessment with your child in order to determine if they qualify for services. If there are gaps in development, they can go ahead and get those services started. If your child is over the age of 3, you can contact your local public school school, and they can do an evaluation to determine if there are gaps in development that need to be addressed through developmental preschool or through school-based services of occupational, physical, speech language therapies, all of those sorts of things. I would also say another thing that you can do is you can directly contact a psychologist or a developmental behavioral pediatrician in order to get an evaluation scheduled. And what I would say about all of these steps is the process can take time. The process takes time in general, but there are also often wait lists for these services. And so if you have concerns, we know that early intervention is crucial, and we know that early intervention is best. So if you have concerns about your child's development, don't take the wait and see approach. And I know a lot of times, grandmas and grandpas will say, oh, well, everybody develops differently and just wait and see, and they'll get there. Or boys develop later than girls, or boys are always late talkers. If you're concerned, reach out for help, whether you do that through your pediatrician or through the school or through First Steps or through any of the great organizations that are presenting today. Reach out to someone. The worst that can happen is you do an evaluation that your kid maybe didn't need. But because we know early intervention is best, we want to get that intervention started as soon as we can. And because these processes can take a while or the wait list can be long, we want to get that started as soon as we can, instead of waiting until it's really apparent that there are some delays, and then we're just getting things started.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. All right. And now Blake with Autism Learning Partners. What does therapy look like for a child that has been diagnosed with autism, and how do parents access this resource?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think when it comes to what does day-to-day therapy look like, that really depends on each individual child. When a child comes to us, we do a skills assessment. And so that really dives into where are those gaps? Where are we maybe behind our peers? Where are things that they're really excelling? And what are some areas of weakness? And then we actually develop their program entirely individualized for that child. So depending on your child's needs, their daily therapy could look very different than another child's. So we can do things like teaching functional communication, just teaching speech and language, and how do you request a snack when you're hungry and juice when you're thirsty. We can go all the way up to having in-depth conversations with friends at school. It can be daily living skills. How do you pick out an outfit that matches when you get dressed in the morning? How do you look at the weather to determine what outfit would even be appropriate? Different things like that. So it really can be very individualized. We also take an approach at Autism Learning Partners where we focus very heavily on what we call natural environment teaching. So what this means is if we are teaching a skill, we're also going to teach the child when is it appropriate to use that skill. So instead of just teaching them how to brush their teeth or how to wash their hands, we're going to teach them, okay, after you go to the bathroom, that's when you wash your hands. Or after you eat dinner, you're getting ready for bed, that's the appropriate time to brush their teeth. So kind of not only teaching them how to do this skill, but when. The context is also very important. And that helps then, our kids are able to take those skills that they learn with us and do them with their parents, with their grandparents. They can do those skills at school. So it's a little bit more of a functional approach. And it also allows for parents to jump in and participate. So we have a very whole family approach to our services. A lot of our therapy for our really young kids is focused around play. That especially really young kids, I'm sure everyone knows they are always on the move. So keeping their attention is our priority. So the best way for us to teach them new skills is by following their lead and what they're really excited about. So if we're trying to teach them communication or social skills or play skills, we see, okay, what are they really excited about right now? And we adjust our approach to fit that. So it works a lot better than trying to get their attention away from their favorite toy. We just go to them and try to teach those skills in that moment. If we're talking about older kids, maybe kids that are getting ready to transition to school, our approach is going to change a little bit because we want them to be successful in whatever environment they're going to next. So in that case, our therapy could look a little bit more like sitting at the table and working on maybe worksheets, or how do you self-regulate when you don't know the answer? How do you problem solve? Things like that, kind of learner readiness skills that are going to be less focused on play, but are still equally important for that learner and that client to be able to learn those skills, so then they can transition out of our services and into a less restrictive environment. So then in terms of how do you access ABA, mostly we are funded through insurance. So I would recommend you can do a quick Google search, and there are a ton of ABA providers in the Indianapolis area. So I think when it comes to that, I would look at which providers accept your insurance. That's going to be the most important thing to make sure that you're in network with them. And then I would kind of do a little bit of research and see what center seems to be the best fit for you. Are you looking for in-center therapy? Or are you looking for in-home? Are you looking for someone who can maybe transition with your child to school? A bunch of different things that you can kind of look at and almost shop around and see what seems to have the best fit for you, what the approach is that makes the most sense for your family. But insurance is going to be really important to make sure that you're covered. Most providers have an insurance team that can help you run your insurance and let you know, are there any copays, deductibles that need to be met, or anything like that. But that's going to be an important step in making sure that the funding is coming from the right place.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. All right, so we are going to move on to general questions for our panel members. So any of our panel members can answer, just depending on who feels like they want to answer this question. So the first one is, can you tell us more about the Family Services Waiver? In particular, who qualifies, what it covers, and how to start the process?
I can answer that, I think. With the Family Supports Waiver, that is through the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services, which is part of Family Social Services Administration. It is based on a disability for an individual diagnosed to be lifelong in nature and diagnosed prior to the age of 22. It is one of a few BEADS waivers that are available, but specifically it's the more common, especially for individuals with younger children. The BEADS waivers are needs-based, so they would be, the BDDS service coordinator would determine eligibility as far as if the family support waiver or the community integration habilitation waiver were more appropriate. Typically, the family support waiver can meet the needs of children and young adults as they transition. And from there, if that family support waiver did not provide the support to the extent needed, that's when the individual would want to work with their support team and with BDDS to determine the best fit of services. The family support waiver can be applied for once a diagnosis is secured. So there's no age requirement. There's no minimum or maximum age for waiver services. If an individual were to have a diagnosis that we're qualifying, so again, an intellectual disability diagnosed prior to the age of 22, determined to be lifelong in nature, they would contact their local BDDS district to complete the application process. Initially, that process is a somewhat basic form in terms of identifying the diagnosis, identifying the specific disability needs in terms of what the individual can and cannot do for themselves and where the support needs are apparent. From there, BDDS would determine and complete what's called the level of care screening instrument, which evaluates the individual's need in more specific terms in 7 different categories. And the individual would need to meet criteria and at least 3 of those to meet the minimum requirement for eligibility for waiver services. At that point, if they did not already have Medicaid, BDDS would work with the family to secure Medicaid, as it is a Medicaid waiver service. Medicaid would be the billing entity for waiver services. as far as starting that process, like I said, once the diagnosis is received from the medical provider, that process could be initiated as far as applying. We, as Family Voices, have a lot of families that contact us either not familiar with waiver, or maybe they've heard of the waiver, but they're not sure if they could qualify or what that process looks like. So we give information on that. And we also refer to local bead service coordinators with questions and with information that they might want to ask to determine if the waiver is going to be a best fit. Like someone said earlier, and I don't remember which panelist it was, but I think it might have been Tracy when she said that, you know, it never hurts to apply and to explore the options available. It's always better to start the process if you think you need it. And then when the time comes, you can determine if you feel it's still a need for the family and for the individual to grow. Typically, the time to process a waiver application right now is right around a year, give or take a couple months, just dependent on the BDDS office and the referrals. And obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, that has changed how BDDS is providing their services. So they are still open, but they've had to adjust. And it appears that that could slow down the application process slightly. However, it doesn't seem to have had a significant impact as far as we've seen thus far.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Next question for all of the panel members, or whoever wants to answer. Not everybody has to answer. What are your recommendations for parents who don't know how to talk to their child about their child's own special need? So that parent whose child is newly diagnosed and they aren't sure how to talk to their child about this diagnosis.
I can go for that one.
Awesome.
So I'm Emily Vidot. I'm a licensed clinical therapist at Easterseals. Typically, I tell parents to follow their kids' lead. As kiddos get older, they might start noticing, why is this harder for me? Why am I not doing something that other kids in my grade are doing? And they might start asking those questions. And I tend to encourage parents to give a simple but honest answer. That, you know, there are some things that, you know, our brains are different. So there are some things that my brain can do really easily. I'm excellent at writing and reading, but my brain makes math a little harder for me. So sometimes I have to work a lot harder than the other kids in my class for math. And your brain is exactly the same. There are certain things that are hard for your brain to do. Maybe if you have autism, maybe it's, you know, thinking through how to talk to friends. Maybe it's something that you might want someone to talk to about so that you can learn how to get those skills, kind of like how I needed extra help in math. So really normalizing that feeling that, yeah, it is really difficult when it feels like you're different from other people. But there are ways that we are all different from each other. There are ways that we are all stronger and areas that we all need to improve. And I think that sometimes, you know, asking our kids, is this something that you maybe want to talk to someone about? And giving them that option of seeing a therapist, or if they would feel most comfortable talking to their mom or dad about it, or, you know, something like that. So that we can, first of all, normalize that it's a really uncomfortable feeling. And, you know, remember a time when you had that, and that, you know, answering the specific questions that they do have. I don't try to like overwhelm kids with a ton of information in terms of their diagnosis. If they asked, why is it hard for me to make friends? I might say, because that part of your brain really struggles with some of that stuff, that, you know, you might have a hard time figuring out how to start a conversation, which is really hard. You think about, you know, we've all been in social situations where you just kind of stand there and you know you're supposed to say something, but you're not sure what it is. And so to really say, like, to break it down into that and say that is something we can work on, and really having that idea of growth, and we can work towards that. And answering the question that they present, not necessarily going beyond that, because that is where we can get really overwhelmed and bogged down in those details. And remembering that if you have a child with a disability, a lot of times their chronological age, so they might be a 10-year-old, doesn't match their developmental age. That developmentally they may be functioning more like a 6-year-old, So we don't want to give that 10-year-old a 10-year-old's worth of information. We want to think about where are they processing it, and we want to keep it that optimistic tone with it, so that they understand that there are some things that are hard, but there are some things that their brains do in ways that mine could never. The memories on my kids, I cannot even handle it, that my brain could never do that. I could never understand these video games. I could never build these things. I could never recognize these patterns. And it's super cool that your brain can. Yeah, your brain may struggle in some other areas, but so does mine. So really just keeping it light, at answering the questions and not overwhelming them with too much information.
That's awesome. So really focusing on strengths, which I think is really, really cool. Anybody else on our panel have any thoughts on that before we move on to our next question?
I was just going to jump in. I think those are amazing answers, especially when you have a child who's more verbal. When you have a child, maybe like mine, I have an 8-year-old with Down syndrome, and she's still relatively nonverbal. And so the approach that we're taking with that is we're just trying to normalize that diagnosis. Like, Down syndrome is something that we talk about all the time. I go in and I talk to her classmates about Down syndrome. I don't know if my daughter has any idea that she has that diagnosis, but we talk about it so much, and it's so much a part of our lives that eventually down the road, when she puts those pieces together, it's not going to be a big deal because it's just a part of our lives.
Awesome.
And I would just add to that there are lots of resources that are available for families, dependent upon diagnosis perhaps, or depending upon the area of special needs, but there are lots and lots of resources, including resources designed specifically for children and introducing those ideas to children. And so I would encourage families to look for those resources or reach out to organizations who can help in kind of vetting some of those resources, because there can be a kid-friendly way or a developmentally appropriate way to address that, and somebody may have already done some of the work for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so the next question is, children are very open and honest. So what direction would you give to a family that has a typically developing child who has a lot of questions about individuals with special needs?
I think this might have two parts, and one of those that I see and that we get referrals or questions about would be especially siblings. So I'll start there with children who have either a younger or older sibling that has a disability. We find that it's difficult sometimes for the other sibling to make sense of things, or to really understand why their brother or sister has so much more attention from mom and dad, or has needs that are so different from them, or maybe, you know, look different or have different capabilities. So we start working with the family on, again, the advocacy with the parents, but also connecting to maybe local support groups or local networks, depending on the degree of need for that sibling. We might look at family therapies specifically focused towards individuals and families with disabilities, so that those families can discuss, you know, their specific needs and the way that they can most effectively care for the family as a family unit, so that not one person is isolated as being the one that takes all of mom's attention or something like that. Because unfortunately, you know, there are times where more effort or more attention is needed for an individual with specific health concerns. When we're talking about kids, maybe another child in the classroom, I think it's great, Stephanie, that you talk to your daughter's classmates and that you go in and share, because I think that it is important for children who may not grow up with a sibling or personal disability to have compassion for other kids and to understand that everyone's different, regardless of if there's a diagnosis or not. I know personally we talk a lot in my own family about labels and about how that's not what defines us. And about how, you know, mom takes medicine for this, dad may take medicine for that, but at the end of the day, that doesn't make us who we are as people. And so we really look to connect, and for our organization, and I would assume most of the other panelists here, you know, we really work with community supports as far as how can we engage and how can we get as much information out there to as many people as possible, so that a disability is no longer a barrier to functioning in the community and being a part of the community. You know, there are people that may have a special health concern that have contributed far more than I could ever imagine in my lifetime. So we really look to try and have those relationships with community partners, so that everyone has access to any information to help their children understand and to help other adults understand these differences.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was super, super helpful information. Anybody else before we keep moving? Okay, so now I want to open it up to all of our panel members. If any of you want to share more info about services and resources you may offer for family members of children with special needs, I know we just talked about that. I also know that we had opened up the questions for people ahead of time, and so attendees could submit questions, and that was one question that came through as well, was suggestions for how to support a child who has a sibling with a special need. So Christine, I'm really glad that you actually spoke about that. But anybody else, any of our other panel members, any services that you may offer for family members of children with special needs, like support groups, resources, trainings, different things like that?
I was gonna, oh, sorry, Lisa.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Just going to throw out there, it's not our organization, but the Joseph Maley Foundation has a sibling camp that's really cool for siblings of children with disabilities to kind of help them to navigate that process. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Again, that's the Joseph Maley Foundation. I know they pre-COVID. I don't know if they still do. But.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
There are also organizations that run a group called SIB Shops, and I'm not aware, and Bonnie might know this information, but I know there was a group, and again, pre-COVID, everything is pre-COVID, right? But that can be a good resource for siblings as well.
Yeah, there's a SIB Shop workshop that's actually coming up, and if anybody wants information about that, shoot me an email and I can get that to you. And my email information will be at the end of this presentation. We also offer a support group at Easterseals. Currently it's through Zoom, and it is on the third Wednesday of the month. And if you'd like to participate in that, shoot me an email and I'll send you the Zoom link for that.
Yeah, also, this is Emily Badeau at Easterseals. The other resources that we provide for family members, one, we provide parent training. So there's an 8-week kind of course that we do for parents of children who have disruptive behavior disorder. So they may have autism, they may have oppositional defiance disorder, they might have an intellectual disability. You know, there are a lot of different reasons why our kids may be disruptive. And so we can do those classes virtually right now or in person. And it's really so that we can try to individualize a behavior plan so that the parents can use some of those strategies that maybe their ABA providers are using or the therapists are using, so that they can feel more confidence in themselves as parents to know, if my child is engaging in a disruptive behavior, this is why it's happening. What can I do to prevent it from occurring again? And if, you know, life happens and it happens anyways, how can I respond to it that makes it less likely to happen again in the future? And how do I build these more appropriate skills that my kids need? And especially if we have a kid with a lot of disruptive behaviors, usually we have a lot of skill deficits. You know, kids, if they knew how to do better, a lot of times they would. So we have that, and then we also have parent-child interaction therapy, which is a specialized treatment for kiddos from about 2 to 7 who have disruptive behaviors, where the parents are taught the skills of a therapist, and then they engage in essentially compliance training, because a lot of times in therapy, the therapist will say, go home and try this. And then the parent goes home and does their best, and it looks totally different than when the therapist did it. And with PCIT, there's live coaching. So when you're a kiddo, you'll have your earbuds in, and when things don't go like you think they're supposed to, then the therapist is right there in your ear to tell you what to do next and to coach you through the situation. So we have a couple of different therapeutic services to support the parents and the siblings of kids with disabilities.
Awesome. Any of our other panel members want to share? Lisa, go ahead.
I just wanted to remind families that we have a lot of special education information on our website, information pertaining to special education and COVID, and that we do help families learn to advocate in that process, and that we can still attend case conferences virtually at this moment to walk alongside that family as they are understanding that process. So I would say our educational components and our attending of case conferences are something that we'd like to make sure that everybody remembers.
Awesome, thank you. Blake, do you have anything to share, or you want to just keep going?
I think the only thing that I haven't talked about yet, we do offer at Autism Learning Partners now, Autism Evaluations. So that's something that we just recently started, I think like 2 months ago. So it's still pretty new. So that is the one thing. Before, it's kind of separate from ABA or social skills groups. We have some families who come to us just looking for that autism diagnosis, and then they can take that and get whatever services they think are appropriate for their child, but that is something that we do offer now.
Awesome, thank you. And I do want to mention that we do have, so we're going to get ready to open it up for audience Q&A. And so if you have a question and you want to put it in the chat box, go ahead. I did mention that we had some people who submitted questions ahead of time, and I do want to let you all know that if you submitted a question ahead of time and we do not get to it during this live broadcast, I will make sure that I get the answers from our panel members, and I will make sure that those answers are shared in the follow-up email. I know that some of the questions that we got were very specific, and so I know who to reach out to for those questions. And then I just want to let everybody know that those will be shared out. And so if you don't hear your question today, don't worry, we will make sure that we get the answers for you. So with that being said, I do want to go ahead and ask a few of the questions that came in ahead of time. So the first question is going to be for Stephanie. Stephanie, we had someone submit a question. They're a parent who has a 2-year-old son with Down syndrome who will be exiting First Step soon, and then they know that they'll be entering some sort of early learning environment in the schools moving forward. So what should the expectations for the parent be at that phase? What should they expect to hear from First Steps? And then how can the caregiver work to help prepare their child for their new learning environment? It's kind of a loaded question. Sorry, Stephanie.
Yeah, that's a big one. So typically around the age of 2.5, your First Steps coordinator should start talking to you about that transition. So they're going to start preparing you for it. They'll probably have you sign some paperwork, giving the school permission to access your file and to attend a case conference or a meeting with like a transition meeting between First Steps and your school system. And they'll start that process. Usually a month or 2 before your child turns 3, the school will do an evaluation, and your child will go in for about 2.5 hours and be evaluated by therapists, teachers, and psychologists at the school. And then based on that evaluation, they'll make recommendations as to how many days a week that your child will qualify for services. The First Steps services stop like the day before your child turns 3. So on that 3rd birthday, your child will officially start in the school system. So ideally, you'll have had your first IEP prior to that and have everything set up and ready to go. Not everyone chooses to continue from first steps into the school system and into developmental preschool. We have a lot of families who prefer to send their children to a community-based preschool where maybe their siblings had attended as well. So there's no cut and dry clear answer as to which path is going to be right for your family. We have some families that whose children go to both the community preschool and the developmental preschool. They do kind of a hybrid model. So there are so many different paths you can take, and I would be happy to talk with that family if you're on this call now and you have questions and you want to talk about maybe some of the pros and cons of each method. Like, we can absolutely talk more about that. I don't know if that was in depth enough.
Yeah, that was super helpful, Stephanie. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that in a little bit, I am going to pop a slide up on the screen that has the names and contact info for some of our panel members. And so when that pops up, you'll want to take a picture of it with your phone, I'm guessing. And then that way, all the panel members have said that it's totally fine if you reach out to them. That way, if you have more specific questions, you can follow up. Okay, so the next question. So we had somebody who asked, what are some of the signs of autism and what age might some of those signs appear?
Yeah, so I can take this one. So often the signs of autism start to emerge between 12 and 18 months, though some families don't really start to get concerned until closer to 2 or 2.5 years old. Every child is a little bit different, but part of the reason we do those screenings, if you've done a well child visit for a 12 or an 18 or a 24-month-old recently, you might have been asked to fill out some questionnaires that relate to autism or other developmental milestones questionnaires. And so the reason we do that is because often that's when the signs and symptoms start to emerge and people start to become aware. Some children don't necessarily get caught at that age, and so some children do get referred later, but that is a pretty common time. Because we know that early intervention is so important, we try to catch those kids as early as we can. Again, those wait lists often tend to be long too, and so trying to get those services started can sometimes be a little problematic. Some of the early signs of autism can be things like delayed language or speech development. It can be poor social interactions, so limited eye contact or social responsiveness to parents and other people, and sometimes those sorts of things emerge even before that 12-month mark, but we really start to get concerned if those skills aren't developing at 12 or 18 months. Some of the other things that sometimes people notice are repetitive behaviors or fixations on certain items that often don't make a lot of sense, or some patterned behaviors like lining up toys or organizing things in certain ways that, again, may or may not make sense to the rest of us. Obviously, the age of the child and the particular child, we like to say in the autism world, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. So there's no hard and fast rule. But if you see those language delays, if you see those delayed milestones in the social interaction, you notice your child doesn't like to play peekaboo or doesn't like to be involved in singing interactive songs with their parents or in their caregivers, that they have poor eye contact and aren't really responding when you come into the room. Those are some signs that we need to do some further exploration. And it doesn't mean your child has autism. It may mean that your child has a hearing impairment and we need to have a hearing evaluation done. It may mean that there's something else going on. But again, those are all reasons to talk to your doctor. The other thing that I will say that a lot of families notice is sometimes their child can appear to be developing typically, and then they notice some regression or some loss of skills. And so if that regression or that loss of skills occurred, we definitely encourage families to talk to their doctor as soon as they can in order to get the process started for evaluation.
So how would a family find out information on telehealth and getting internet service during everything that's going on with telehealth appointments and virtual appointments?
I think for Family Voices, I mentioned earlier that we recently were awarded a grant. We are specifically putting together a variety of different avenues towards gathering and providing this information. Currently, I know that there are services that are available for, like if the need is access to Wi-Fi to be able to complete telehealth, for example. Most service providers, Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum, have some form of assistance program or prepaid service that the families could look into. That's something that we as an organization help with. If it's specifically how to use the actual device or the app that the medical provider has identified, or the service provider, if this is, you know, a waiver service or a therapy service. A lot of those programs are starting to add some kind of technical support and are asking families to try and log in earlier. Again, that's where advocacy comes in as well, that if telehealth isn't the right fit and that it's not the best option, that you're working with your provider to identify what other options are available, especially during COVID-19. But there's also talk with ongoing, what's that change going to be? And is telehealth going to be a billable service ongoing, just like going into a doctor's office? So I think that these changes are going to be around for a while, and really families can reach out to us at any point in time for help identifying those resources. I know the schools are helping as far as the e-learning piece goes, and those are kind of tied together hand in hand in some ways. If a child needs access for education, they're also probably needing access for the medical side. So there are resources out there. I think that we'll start to see even more of that. But if there is a specific need, I'd be happy to help. If someone wants to shoot me an email or give us a call, we're more than happy to work with families on that need.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we have another question. She says, my after therapy question is about a 3-year-old child with autism. Riding a bus is not an option. We have had a hard time finding a center that will take our insurance and has aftercare. Any recommendations?
I do know there are quite a few centers around the Indy area that do aftercare to some degree. I think everyone's a little different with, is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour max? Things like that. So I think my recommendations, some people were putting some really great thoughts in the chat. The Medicaid waiver, I think, has some great options in terms of transportation and respite services that could potentially bridge that gap from after ABA to when parents are able to get home. Another thing could potentially be looking at in-home ABA services. So you aren't even needing to transport. So that service is happening in the home, maybe with a babysitter, or if your child is going to preschool, anything like that, services could happen in those locations, or they could happen like in the evenings or on the weekends when the parents are already home. And that could potentially help just eliminate that need for transportation with a bus or anything like that while working around a work schedule.
Another question for Stephanie. How would a caregiver go about finding local playgroups with children or for children with Down syndrome in their area? What about free public therapy, playgroups, or places that offer stimulation for gross and fine motor and speech learning?
All right, this person has some really detailed questions. I love it. So there are a lot of places that offer some really great playgroups and therapies. Gigi's Playhouse is one place that you might want to look into. Gigi's Playhouse is located up in Castleton, and they provide free therapies and have a lot of different playgroups that serve specifically children with Down syndrome. There are also different clinics around town. I know IUPUI has clinics through their physical education department. They have a motor lab that has some opportunities. I believe Butler's speech and language program has some opportunities as well. And Down Syndrome Indiana has community groups that are located around central Indiana. Some of them are geographically based, and some of those groups are more like identity based. So for example, we have a group for parents of children with Down syndrome who speak Spanish. We have a group for moms, a group for dads, a group for our family of color who have children with Down syndrome. And so a lot of those community groups, they are all run by parents who are part of that community. And a lot of those groups have get-togethers, so play groups and different activities that you could be involved in. And we like to have parents get involved. So if there's a particular thing that you're looking for and that isn't out there, reach out to us, and we'd love to talk with you about how we can create it and get it started. I don't know where the questioner lives particularly, but if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk with you about what may be closer to your area.
Awesome, thank you. And then another question for you, Stephanie. So a 2-year-old son with Down syndrome does well with word approximation and signing. He comprehends instructions like put your cup on the table or take off your shoes really well, but isn't saying a lot of specific words yet. For instance, he doesn't say mommy, daddy, etc. Should this parent be worried yet, or is there more that they can do to help him verbally get to forming his own words?
Yes. So I can tell you, my daughter is very much that way too. Her receptive language, so what she understood, far exceeded her ability to express that language. And really at 8, I feel like she's just having an expressive language explosion here recently. So while I don't necessarily know that you need to be concerned, it's absolutely something that you want to continue working with. Sometimes doing one therapy through First Steps isn't necessarily going to be enough. So you could look into maybe doing additional therapies through private insurance or Medicaid to get a different approach, because there are a lot of different approaches to speech therapy. One thing that I have found that has worked really well for us as a family is I feel like we didn't always do a very good job of encouraging my daughter to access her language. She was babysat by grandparents, and their go-to, like the second she had a weird look on her face, they were like, oh, what do you need? Do you need fish? Do you need water? Can I get you some milk? What can I do? Like they were throwing things at her. So she didn't have a lot of need to be able to communicate that. So the more we as a family helped her to have to ask for what she wanted, the better she has done. And then I would also tell you, absolutely do not limit yourself to expressly verbal communication. You know, language begets language. So whether your child can communicate via sign language or picture communication, start helping your son to understand that when he wants something and he asks, he gets it. So really work on those pieces of communication that are going to get him what he wants. When my daughter was 2 years old, we had a picture board of all of her favorite television programs with the characters, so that when she wanted to watch something, she could grab that card and hand it to us. And that is communication. It's not verbal communication, but that will come with time. So I don't know if any of the therapists have additional things that you guys might want to add in, but.
No, I totally agree with you. I totally had to change my parenting style with my daughter after she was diagnosed, because, you know, I want to attend to her. I'm her mom, but when you flip the script and you have her ask for the things that she needs, that's when the expressive language is going to come, and it's awesome. So I would definitely say you just have to kind of change the way you parent and try to learn the basics of ABA, or go see one of our lovely therapists at Easterseals that can help you. Our parent training class is awesome. But yeah, they need to be motivated to communicate, And you also need to be exciting, make your child excited to see you, pay attention to them, play with them, and that really motivates children.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Go ahead,
And
Stephanie.
I was just gonna add, my daughter didn't didn't call me a name until she was probably 4. And I'm a good mom, but she called everybody else names. Her janitor at school, Bob, she called Bob, but she never said mom. And the M sounds are just hard for her. So at 4, she randomly one day started calling me T, not a cute little girly T, but like a pack-a-day smoker, T. That's what she decided to call me. And then at probably 5 or 6-ish, one day, boom, it changed, and she calls me Hop now. HOP, but it's her approximation of mom. She has speech apraxia, and that's just her approximation. So it will come. Be patient, and I know your son loves you, even though he doesn't give you a name. That's all.
That's awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so we did have somebody ask, where can a caregiver take a child to be evaluated for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder?
This isn't necessarily my area of expertise, but I'll do the best I can to point people in the right direction.
Awesome.
So often with fetal alcohol syndrome, the concerns, there are a couple of different routes that someone can take. So often you might be referred to a geneticist or a neurologist to kind of explore the medical side of things. When it comes to determining or along with that could be, developmental behavioral pediatrics or something similar to that. Some sort of developmental specialist can look at the medical side of things. On the other side, when you might be talking about, it kind of depends again what age your child is and what your question is, because the question is not just, does my child have a diagnosis necessarily, but what other supports and services might my child need? What sorts of intervention might I need, and what might I need to do from this perspective going forward, whether that's at school or whether that's in an outpatient realm or whether that's thinking about transition to adulthood or whatever that might be. And so sometimes they're a neuropsychological evaluation to really determine learning strengths and weaknesses and challenges and overall functioning levels, and all of that can also be very helpful if fetal alcohol syndrome is suspected or has even been confirmed. So a lot of times it's a multi-step process and a multi-step, depending on the age of the child, multi-pronged in order to know kind of what to do at that point.
Thank you, Tracy. And then I do have one more question that had come in. Is there any, do any of our panel members have ideas or recommendations for resources for a child who has hearing loss?
I would definitely recommend Here Indiana. It's in the same building as Easterseals in Indianapolis. My own daughter went there. She has hearing loss and autism, and they are an amazing organization. You can get tested there, and they also offer speech therapy there. So I think that's probably the best location. Riley, it takes a little bit to get in. So I definitely recommend Here Indiana.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so if there are any more questions, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, you could also look at the Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing and Hands and Voices. Those are some of the ones that we often find that families utilize.
Awesome, thank you guys so much. All right, so there is the contact info for our panel members. So now is the time to take out your phone and take a quick picture of that. These are the panel members, and then this is the information for the state when it comes to child care resource and referral agencies. So if you're located in somewhere, if you're located somewhere besides Hamilton, Hendricks, and Marion counties, and you're looking to get a hold of your local child care resource and referral agency to get hooked up with all of the free services that we offer. You can check this out and you can reach out. Just a reminder that at your local child care resource and referral agency, we all operate on a contract through the state of Indiana, and the services that we offer are free. And so when it comes to helping find childcare, individualized support, if you're looking for somebody to kind of help you explore other resources that are out there, we are here to help, and we are here to offer you as much information and support as possible. And so this is my info. If you have any questions about who we are and what we do, or you are wanting to get connected with us, or you're wanting to get connected with any of the panel members, you have any other follow-up questions, anything, I am here to help you, and you can always feel free to reach out to me. I want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to our panel members. You all were fantastic. We are so lucky that we were able to have you guys with us today. The information that you shared was invaluable and is going to really impact and make a huge difference for a lot of families and a lot of individuals. So thank you all so much for being here. If you have anything, any questions you have for me, just feel free to reach out. I will also go back to the slide that has our panelist contact info on it, so that you can reach out to them as well. Thank you guys so much.